I was 12 years old and on holiday with my family in Spain. Myself and my mother liked to get up early each day, around 7 a.m. My mother and I would swim in a pool. It was peaceful and no one else was there. My mother is a keen reader and would usually get out of the pool after around 30 minutes swimming. She would sit on a deck chair at the side of the pool and leave me to paddle about with the beach ball bought from the local shop. Being a hyperactive 12-year-old on holiday, this did not satisfy me. I quickly became bored. The novelty of playing alone in the pool as my parents sat at the side the other few days had worn off. I got out the pool and sat on a deck chair beside my mother. She asked me why I had gotten out. "I'm bored," I would simply tell her. I am a keen soccer fan, Celtic being my team, and I was on vacation right in the middle of the summer transfer window. This is pretty much when teams buy and sell players. I had no clue what was going on with my team, who we had bought or sold. "I really want to know what is going on with Celtic," I moaned to my mother. "Well, how about you buy a newspaper? You'll be able to read about them in the sports section." "Yes, that'll be great," I excitedly replied. "Here's €2, she continued. "Go to the supermarket and they will have the newspapers at the front." The supermarket, I thought? Just 2 days earlier when we arrived, me and my father had gotten a taxi to the supermarket to buy bottles of water and a toothbrush as my younger sister had forgotten hers. I found it strange that my usually overprotective mother would let me walk that far on my own in a foreign country. I said nothing. However, I was excited by the sense of freedom, and as I was going into high school after summer, I thought of myself as an adult. I left the poolside and walked into the hotel. I left through the front door and began walking. The slick white pavement began deteriorating into a beaten down old sandy road. The road was long and completely dead. There was no cars, no nothing. It took me around 15 minutes to walk to the supermarket. It was strange that my mother would allow me to walk this far on my own. I mean, she wouldn't even let me walk this far alone back home. So why would she let me do it in an unknown foreign country? However, I continued. I guess if my mother thought it was alright, it must be something good, right? Anyway, I got to the supermarket around 8:05 a.m. It was shut. There was a small sticker and it was in Spanish. The only thing I could understand was 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. It wasn't open for another hour. I waited for a while, around 10 minutes, then angrily stormed off. Why would my mother send me this far if it wasn't even open? I began walking down the sandy road again, dreading the long walk back to the poolside without the newspaper that held all the news about my soccer team. As I was walking, I heard a loud car. The noise was like a race car. I quickly turned around as I wasn't even walking on a sidewalk, just the sandy outskirts of the road. A white beaten up car with tinted windows was coming hurtling towards me. I was scared, not because of who might be in the car, but just the sheer noise it was making and the speed it was going at. I stood further in at the side of the road and stood watching it. And I did not want to walk with my back to it, and I feared it would hit me and I would not see it to get out of the way. Suddenly, the car halted. A man poked his head out of the passenger window and shouted something in Spanish. Perplexed, I said I'm Scottish. He then replied, "Come here, young man, come here." I was froze. I was a naive 12-year-old and did not know what the hell was going on. Was this a taxi driver that my mother had sent to get me after realizing the supermarket would not be open? Was this a hotel worker that spotted me walking to the hotel and decided to give me a lift? All these questions were going through my head. The man suddenly got out and swore at me. "Get the fuck over here." I immediately got scared. I thought this guy had mistaken me for someone else. Or maybe he thought I was trying to break into the supermarket or something, after I was standing outside it for so long. I pleaded, "I haven't done anything." Then he aggressively jerked open the backseat door and charged at me. I knew I was in danger now. I may have been a naive 12-year-old, but I knew what this was. This guy was trying to take me, throw me in the back seat to do who knows what. Being the athletic kid I was, I ran at a great speed to get away from this angry guy trying to take me. He was chubby and middle-aged, But even though I was athletic, I was small and his legs were a lot longer than mine, so he was easily catching up to me. It's okay, little boy. He was panting in a creepy tone as he chased after me, clearly out of breath. I was so scared. I was sure he was going to catch me. Whoever was in the driver's seat began revving up the car. The weird and fucked up thing is, they didn't actually chase me in the car. He just revved it up over and over, almost to scare me with the noise. I was tiring super quick. I'm from Scotland and it's always cold, so I was not used to the heat. I stopped and just burst into tears. Please, I'm so sorry for whatever I've done. The man put his hand on his knees and began trying to regain his breath. It's okay, little boy. He walked towards me, then grabbed my arm with great force and yanked me towards him. Now, I don't know where the fuck this aggression came from. Maybe the pain and shock of him grabbing me like this. But I stamped my foot on his shin hard. He yelled and let go. Before I can get away, he punched me in the side of my head and began swearing at me. The man was spitting with rage. The beaten up car was now some distance away, but I could still hear it being revved up. He started shouting at me in pretty broken English, mostly swearing and saying, "Tough guy," in between the profanity. He pushed me over, kicked me and spat on me. He walked back to the car and it turned and drove off. I got up and ran like I've never before. I didn't know why they had left. Was it to get more people? To get weapons? Who knows? I got back to the hotel and entered through the front door. I saw my mother standing speaking to the staff with two cops speaking to a man in a suit, which turned out to be the manager. She immediately grabbed and hugged me, then burst into tears and screamed at me, "Where did you go?" I didn't know why I was in so much trouble. I went where she told me to. I presumed my mother was in trouble for letting her young kid go this far on their own. And that coupled with a beating I had got, I burst into tears and angrily shouted at my mother, telling her she was horrible and other things. I couldn't believe she had irresponsibly let me go that far, allowing me to get scared shitless and beaten up. After I calmed down, the situation was explained to me. My mother meant for me to go to the supermarket located on the hotel complex. I did not know about the supermarket as it was a pretty big hotel, and just presumed she had meant the large supermarket we went to on the first day. I explained everything to the cops and they wrote it down. While I was explaining this, the first aid team at the hotel tended to my injuries. My mother took me back to the hotel room where she sat and cried and calling me a stupid boy for what I had done. She calmed down, feeling sorry for me about what I had been through. She took me to the supermarket to get a newspaper. My heart stopped as I saw the front page of a local newspaper that was in English. Danger, unmarked taxis killing spree. The cops had been pretty scarce with the information they had given us and discussed it more with the hotel manager in Spanish than with us. Up until I saw that newspaper, I just presumed I had pissed the guy off, but then I realized I had gotten real lucky.
Back when I was a teenager, I was leaving a fast food drive-thru and someone in an old Bronco started to follow me. At first I thought it was a road rage situation, so I did the sorry wave and tried to let him pass, but he swerved at me like he was trying to hit my car or something. He pulled up alongside of me and was screaming out the window, just incoherently furious, continuing to swerve at me. This was before the days of cell phones, and I was in an unfamiliar area of town. I was driving a Firebird and tried to outrun him, but he would run red lights and make crazy turns to try to keep up with me. I eventually ran into a dead end, and he pulled his truck across the road to block it. There were big ditches on either side, so I was stuck. He got out of his car and started scrambling at my door handle. His face was inches away from mine and just screaming and screaming in a way that seemed like he couldn't even quite see me. Shaking and crying, I turned on my overhead light so he could see that I was just a teenage girl and not the person he was looking for. He jumped on my hood and started pounding on my windshield. I was screaming and crying and he stopped, held up one finger like, wait a minute, and scurried off to his truck. I floored the gas and ran into the ditch and out and drove like a crazy person for 45 minutes until I knew that I had lost him. I have no idea what his deal was. My mom thought that I made up this entire story to lie about the damages to my car and still doesn't believe me to this day.
This happened to me about 3 years ago now. I'll give you a bit of background info. I was 17 at the time. I was still in school and lived in a small town in Northern America. Anyways, back to my story. 3 years ago, a new girl named Kate joined my school. She was pretty good looking, I guess. She was in my class seated behind me. In the first week of her being there, she made quite a few friends in just a week. I was a bit surprised. One day, I bumped into her in the canteen. She was very talkative and friendly. She sat with me, and we had a small conversation. She was very nice. When school finished, she walked home with me, and we talked some more. She lived a few houses away. The next day, we talked quite a lot. She seemed like she was interested in me. She asked for my number, and I gave it to her. That turned out to be a huge mistake. When I got home, she texted me a lot. I mean a lot. She wouldn't stop. I just went along with it so that she wouldn't get pissed off. It eventually stopped when I told her I was going to sleep. The next day it started again. She wouldn't stop talking to me. When I got home, she started texting like mad. I was getting pissed off. I mostly ignored her. Later, it was getting so annoying, I put my phone on silent. The next day at school, she was mad at me, asking why I wasn't responding to her messages. I told her that I was busy with homework. She wasn't satisfied with my answer and she left. Throughout the whole day, she didn't talk to me much. Walking home from school, she stayed behind me, not wanting to talk. I didn't mean to hurt her feelings, but she was so annoying. Later that day, she didn't text me at all. I wasn't bothered by it, but the next day, it's when all the weird shit started to happen. She stared at me a lot throughout the day. She looked like she wanted to kill me. I tried to stay clear of her. When I got home from school, my mom told me that she was going out that night with my dad and that I could have a friend over for the night. So I called my best friend Brad over. He got to my house at 10. We mostly played video games. At 11:30, my mom called me. She told me that she was expecting a letter that day, but she forgot to check the mailbox before leaving. And she asked me if I could take a look and see if it was there. I went outside and checked the mailbox. There was a letter inside. I didn't bother reading it. When I got back inside, I threw it on a coffee table in my living room. Brad told me to put a different game in. When I was about to switch the game out, I turned around and Brad was reading the letter with a confused look. It went along the lines of, dude, look at this. And I said, why are you reading my mom's letter? That's private. And he said, just look. He showed me the letter. It said on the front in big red letters, David, my name. I was confused and then opened the letter. I was horrified and it said, I'll be seeing you very soon. I almost fainted. I immediately closed all the curtains and turned all of the lights off. We kept playing, but every 5 minutes I kept checking the window to see if anyone was there. At 1 in the morning, I eventually stopped looking out the window, thinking it was just some pranksters fucking with me. At 1:30, something horrific happened. We were watching a film and I got thirsty, so I went to the kitchen for a drink. When I passed the window, I decided to take one last look through the window. When I looked, there was a black figure hiding behind my neighbor's fence, scanning my house. I immediately pulled away from the window. Terrified, Brad noticed something was wrong. I told him that there was a figure hiding behind the fence. He went to look. He then said that he saw 2 figures, not just one. I almost threw up. Brad turned off the TV and we went upstairs and hid in the bedroom. We were going to call the police, but I forgot my phone downstairs and Brad didn't have any credit. So I had to go downstairs and get mine. As I tiptoed down the stairs, I got to the door and looked through the peephole. The figures were there, both wearing masks, trying to pick the lock. I tried to keep quiet. I got my phone and went back upstairs. We were about to call the police, but then I heard the front door open downstairs. We hid in the bedroom closet. We heard footsteps downstairs. We tried to keep as quiet as possible. They eventually got upstairs. One of them came into the bedroom. I saw them through the opening between the doors. They took off their mask, and it was Kate. She had something that looked like tape in her hand. The other person that was with her was a guy, and he had something that looked like a knife or something. They then started talking, and this is what they said. I still remember it as clear as day. "Are you sure he's here?" What? He's with someone else. I seen him come here a few hours ago. "So what did we do with the other guy?" "We came for David. Just kill the other guy if you have to." "All right." The man then started to walk over to the closet. I had a baseball bat in there. I was ready to use it, if I had to. The closest door flew open. He grabbed Brad. He was struggling with him. I hit him a couple of times with the bat. He let Brad go. I also managed to break his mask. He was an older looking man with a long messy beard. Kate ran into the room. It was 2-on-2. Brad grabbed my bedside lamp and smashed it in Kate's face. I kept hitting the man non-stop. Brad grabbed the guy from behind, but it was no use. He was too big and strong. He overpowered Brad in an instant and stabbed him in the shoulder. I was behind the guy, so I kicked him in the back of the knee and hit him in the head with the bat. Brad still had the knife in his shoulder, but he was standing. We ran as fast as we could to the neighbor's house. We called the police and an ambulance. Just as they arrived, I saw a van drive down the road with its license plates missing. It was definitely them. I knew it. I shouted to the police that was them. They gave chase, and the paramedics came and took Brad to the hospital. I went with him. Brad had to have an operation because the wound was really deep. I had a few cuts and bruises, but it was nothing compared to what happened to Brad. Later on, the police came to question me. I told them everything I could. They said that they followed the van, but they eventually lost it when they was on the freeway. They couldn't get its license plate because it didn't have any. I told them about Kate and where she lived. They said that they would have to have a look at her house. Then they left. Afterwards, I had to go home. I explained everything to my parents. I couldn't sleep in my room since it was trashed. The next day, the police were at my door. They said that the house was recently abandoned, but they found a photo of Kate and an older man. I could only assume it was her father or something. It's been 3 years now, and me and Brad are still best buds, but I still wonder what that psycho bitch wanted with me.
Back in the 70s, my grandfather dropped off my grandmother, mom, and her 2 sisters off to do some shopping on his way to work. Since he wasn't able to pick them up, they decided to hitchhike home. My mom, at the time, was only about 10 or 11 years old. The middle sister would have been about 7 or 8, and the youngest was about a year old. They got picked up by a guy in a pickup truck who had them all sit in the back row with one of them holding the baby. My grandmother was giving directions to their home from the highway, but the guy ignored her and took an exit, claiming that he had to make a stop first. He didn't really say much else to them during the drive. My mom just remembers my grandmother being very quiet and very nervous. Eventually, they came up to a farm. The driver told them to wait in the car, and then he went inside the house. While he's gone, they just sat there, terrified. They're in the middle of nowhere, and they know that they couldn't make it out on foot. A few minutes later, the driver comes out with a second guy who looks into the truck and sees my mom's youngest sister. The guy starts to flip out, screaming at the driver that he shouldn't have brought the baby back. He said that they aren't going to do anything with her and some other things that I can't remember. He ends up telling the driver to get them away from the farm. The driver gets back into the truck, apologizes, and then they get back on the highway and drive again in silence. My grandmother was normally quite a smart woman, but had him drive directly to their house. I think that her reasoning was that she had already given them the address to begin with. They lived at that house for several more years and luckily never saw either of them a second time.
I was around 8 and a half. We lived in these huge new stucco subdivisions in central Cali. It was the mid-90s and things were awesome in my blonde world. I had a friend that lived 2 blocks down and 1 block over. Out of respect for her, I would call her April. I liked April because she was chubby like me. I was not constantly pulling out my clothes and trying to cover myself when I was with her. We were comfortable just being ourselves. We always had such a wonderful time at school together. We would always stick up for each other when things got crazy. It was not until we had been friends for about a year or so that we first spent the night at each other's houses. We had a sleepover at my house and we had done all the normal stuff. You know, talking about boys and playing truth or dare. Okay, dare, I said. She thought for a second and then said the strangest thing I have ever heard at that point in my young life. She said, I dare you to get naked and put your head down on the couch and stick your bottom way all up in the air. I was like, why in the world would you say something like that? Then she said something even stranger, because that's how good girls get prizes. Now let me be clear, in my household, we did not see each other without clothes. I had never even seen my mother without clothes on, so any mention of getting naked publicly was really terrifying for me. I think I was more fixated on that because it made me so nervous than I was fixated on what the hell was she talking about, prizes. What? I insisted that we switch to a different game. We had forgot about the whole thing because 8-year-old kids don't read too much into things. Now I'll jump to the first time I spent the night at her house. I swear this girl had a preoccupation with bathing. At least that's what I thought at the time. Her parents must really want her to be clean. Again, an 8-year-old kid's reasoning. She was always trying to get me to take a shower. Any little thing that we did. Whoops, we're dirty. We had better go and shower. After 2 or 3 times of this, I had kind of decided not to hang out at April's house anymore. Not because it was so creepy, although it should have been, but because it was more annoying than anything and it got in the way of our play. I never told my mother about this because I did not deem it necessary. How wrong I was. I wish to God I had said something. I think it is pretty obvious by now what was happening to April at home. A couple of months went by and summer, glorious summer, came around. In the middle of July, April shows up on my doorstep. I was surprised but also excited to see my friend. She had an invitation in her hand, an invitation to her 10th birthday that included cake and pizza and a pool party and a sleepover. I got this strange quiver in my stomach that never really felt before. I said, I will have to ask my mom if I can go. April got this kind of desperate look on her face, and she said, pretty please, Abby? My stepdad will really be mad if you don't come. I kind of stopped at this statement. Okay, no one will hang out with her because she is a little strange, and I guess her parents are mean about it. So I wanted to help out my buddy, and I said, this is going to be a totally awesome party. So the day the party rolls around and I have my little bag, my Little Mermaid swimsuit, and oh yeah, my Winnie the Pooh bear blanket. And we had a good time until her stepdad gets home. And I had seen him before, but just briefly. He seemed to always be on the edges of things, kind of watching from the distance. I never really saw him interact with April at all. She always acted shy and kind of scared when he was around. He did not even look like a creep. He was thin and strong looking, and I remember he had a thick head of silver hair with a mustache to match. But he seemed to carry a kind of darkness with him, or however a kid interprets that sort of thing. Today he seemed far more interested in our activities than I had seen him before. He clapped his hands together and said in a loud voice, "The first girl to get in the pool gets a prize." Of course we all squealed and ran to get changed. We had been in the pool for an hour and I said I was ready to get out and get changed. Her mother would come and say, "Okay honey, but you do need to take a shower if you don't want your hair to turn green." So I looked around kind of sheepishly. I did not like this idea at all. She was however very insistent, and you don't tell the mother of your friend whose house you were staying at no. So I complied very quickly. I might add it gave me the creeps to be doing this in someone else's house. Anyway, I did my thing and came out in a towel carrying my clothes and headed for April's room to change it to my jammies. And as I walked into the room, I looked up and there was her stepdad actually laying down in her bed. He had his jeans on, but he was shirtless. And what he said next still makes my skin crawl to this day. "Hi, baby. Are you ready for your nap?" I did not even think. I just felt invisible hands pushing me to turn around, and there was an urging voice saying, "Run, girl, freaking run." And I did just that. I ran 1 block over and 2 blocks up, back to my house in a freaking towel. No one saw me, obviously. I think they would have questioned a small child running down the street wrapped in a towel and utterly confused. I never told my mom because we did not discuss naked things, as she liked to call them. It was not until I was about 19 that I really understood what was going on. I know April was suffering at the hands and other parts of her stepdad. If I had said something, I might have helped her. I have no idea where she is now or what happened to her. I wish that my mother was a little less modest. Then maybe I could have spoken to her and helped my friend. Teach your daughters about their bodies, please, parents, and make sure you tell them that if anything that someone is saying or doing makes them feel sick inside, to listen to that feeling and to not stick around.
My family and I were driving on this road in Poland. Next to our car was this truck that was delivering large concrete pipes. We drove next to it for about an hour, maybe 2. I was a teenager at the time, so I didn't really care. My dad figures that we should stop at the next gas station for a quick toilet break. As I exit the car, a pair of motorcycles drive past the gas station. We got back on the road. About a mile or so down the road, there was an accident. The motorcycles had caught up with the truck, and as they were about to drive past it, the large concrete pipes fell off the truck and smashed the bikers. Maybe they weren't fastened properly, or the truck swerved or something. I'm not sure, but they were dead. There was blood everywhere. I still have a hard time thinking about what could have happened to us.
This event happened to me 2 years ago when I was 16. I'm 18 now, but it still sends shivers down my spine. I'm a decent looking teen. Blue eyes, blonde hair, that kind of thing, so I was used to getting male attention and didn't think much of it. At the time this happened, I had a summer job working at a local library. It was long shifts and quite boring, but I needed the money. The day started like any other morning. I had my headphones on and was stacking books. I should note that I normally worked at the help desk, but on this particular day, I was assigned with the dull and dreary job of stacking books. Around an hour into my shift, a middle-aged man walked up to me. He didn't look very suspicious, probably about middle-aged, tall with glasses. He just stood there looking at me. I tried to ignore him, but it was hard, especially as he was humming loudly to a slow and creepy tune. I looked around and asked him to politely stop. I immediately regretted talking to him as he started asking me lots of questions when I just wanted to listen to my music and get on with my job. It was the usual stuff, like, "You're very pretty" and "How old are you?" I gave him short, quick answers and went back to stacking books. But every time I did that, he would ask me something else. After about 10 or so minutes of this, I'd had enough and asked him as politely as I could, "Look, sir, I have a lot of work to do. If you need help looking for a book, the help desk is just over there." He looked straight at me with this weird, creepy look in his eyes and said, "I'd like your help, please. Can you help me find a book?" At this point, I was fed up and wondering what the hell this man wanted. I got up and hoped if I helped him, he would then go away. I asked him what book he was looking for, and he gave me another creepy smile. Buried Alive. A book that was about a kidnapping story. I told him we did not have such a book, and that I had to go. You'd think he'd get the hint, but no. "Well, do you have any other books on kidnapping?" he said. I told him that no, I didn't think so, but I can show him to the true crime section, and maybe he would find something there. I did that and then went back to my music, happy to have got rid of him. But not for long. He came back up to me, this time carrying a large pile of gruesome books on murders, shootings, serial killers. I was a bit weirded out, but I told myself there was some logical reason to this. He looked at my name tag and said, "Ah, hello, Elizabeth, now I remember your name." I excused myself and hoped this would be the last time I saw him. After that, I went on my night shift and just assumed he'd left. At 4 p.m., I left and started walking to the bus stop. The second I turned the block, I felt someone come out right behind me. "Hi, Elizabeth, remember me?" Oh God, I thought to myself, what does he want now? "I didn't want to bother you while you were working, so I waited here for you. I thought we could continue our conversation from earlier." Questions ran through my mind. Who was this guy? What does he want? I carried on walking, but he followed me, not saying anything. At this point, I was walking as fast as I could, and I know he was following me. What he said next chilled me to the bone. "Do you know who my favorite serial killer is?" My heart was pounding, and I didn't know what to do, so I made some kind of excuse. I think I left something at the library." Thankfully, it was only a block away. I hot-footed it out of there and told my manager and the security exactly what happened. I was still in a state of shock. Anyway, they called the police and they came shortly after. My mother told me what happened next. They caught the man in exactly the stop I left him at, and they found a knife, a rope, and duct tape in his pocket. He was arrested soon after. So, creepy man from the library? Let's not meet again. Thanks for watching my video, guys. If you liked ReignBotHorror's parts, make sure you go subscribe to her right now. Her link is in my description. Please go like my Facebook, go follow me on Instagram, and also go join my Reddit. And make sure you don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment this video. Also, email me any horror stories that you guys have. My email is MADDMIKEHorror@yahoo.com. And thank you for watching. You guys are the best.